They finally texted you. After all the silence, the waiting, the endless nights wondering if they'd ever think about you again, there it is. Their name lights up your screen, and for a split second, it feels like the universe is giving you closure, validation, maybe even a second chance. Your pulse quickens, your mind races. 100 thoughts flood in. What should I say? Should I sound calm or emotional? Do I ignore it, or do I pour my heart out? But before you type a single word, you need to understand something crucial. This message, this moment, is not just a conversation. It's a psychological test. How you respond will either reinforce your growth and emotional strength, or unravel the very progress you fought so hard to build. This isn't just about texting back, it's about protecting the identity you've rebuilt in their absence. After a period of no contact, your silence wasn't just avoidance, it was a statement. A powerful shift from needing their attention to reclaiming your worth. You were rewiring your nervous system, resetting the emotional addiction, pulling your energy back from a place that drained you. And now, with one message, the old patterns try to awaken again. The need for approval, the urge to be heard, the impulse to prove something. But here's the truth, no one tells you. They didn't text you because they suddenly realized your value. Not yet. More often than not, people reach out when their control starts slipping, when your silence starts making noise, when they feel your detachment, your absence, your evolution. And this moment, this single moment, is where most people lose their leverage. They get too eager, too emotional, too responsive. They forget that power is not in what you say. It's in what you withhold. It's in restraint. This message you just got, it's a window into their psychology. Are they guilt-tripping you, testing the waters, dropping a breadcrumb to see if you're still hooked, or genuinely reaching out? Whatever the reason, your response will teach them what they can or cannot get away with. And make no mistake, your reply is not just about words. It's about tone, timing, and energy. If you respond from a place of desperation, they'll feel it. If you reply from a place of calm strength, they'll sense that too. Every message you send after no contact is a silent message about your worth. And in this moment, silence is your most powerful sentence. So, if you want to maintain your power, protect your peace, and truly flip the dynamic, you must avoid the reply traps that almost everyone falls into. Because once you fall into them, it's incredibly hard to climb back out without losing respect, both theirs and your own. This is more than just another video. This is your emotional armor. So let's expose the 3 biggest reply traps that silently destroy your power when they reach out, and more importantly, how to avoid them with strategy, calm, and stoic clarity. Number 1. Over-explaining your feelings. When they finally break the silence and message you, it can feel like a dam of emotion is about to burst. All the unsent messages, the nights you played conversations in your head, the imaginary dialogues where you finally told them how much they hurt you, they all rush to the surface. It's tempting to believe that if you just explain how deeply you were wounded, how long you waited for a response, how every unanswered message felt like rejection all over again, maybe then they'll understand. Maybe then they'll apologize. Maybe they'll regret everything and come back for real this time. But this is the exact trap, the emotional trap that so many fall into. You take their single message and turn it into your stage for confession. You pour your heart out, thinking that honesty will heal everything. You reveal how much you still care, how broken you were, how hard it's been without them. But in doing so, you unintentionally flip the dynamic back in their favor. because now they're no longer the one being confronted by the consequences of their actions. They're being comforted by your vulnerability. They no longer have to wonder if you've moved on or grown stronger. You've made it crystal clear. You were just waiting, and that single truth kills all the power and mystery you had rebuilt through silence. The hard reality is that people don't regret losing someone because that person explained their pain. They regret losing someone when they realize they can no longer access them. Regret is born in absence, not explanation. It's born in the space you create when you stop giving them emotional supply. When you break no contact by over-explaining your emotions, what you're really doing is seeking permission to still care. You're hoping they'll say, "I felt the same," or "I'm sorry, I made a mistake." But you're putting your healing in the hands of the very person who broke you. That's not empowerment. That's dependency in disguise. And here's what makes this trap so dangerous. It feels authentic. It feels noble, even. You tell yourself you're just being honest, transparent, open-hearted. But what you're really doing is negotiating your self-worth in the emotional marketplace, trying to get their validation in exchange for your vulnerability. And that's a losing trade every time, because in their mind, your emotional exposure doesn't necessarily evoke empathy. Sometimes it evokes control. Now they know exactly how you feel. Now they know they still matter. Now they know you're still emotionally attached. And whether they intended it or not, they're back in the position of power. Not because they earned it, but because you gave it away by oversharing. The psychological truth is this: people value what they fear losing, not what's always available, not what begs to be understood. When you respond with a tidal wave of emotion, you remove all uncertainty. You satisfy their curiosity. And when curiosity dies, so does urgency. They no longer feel pressure to change, because they see that even after all this time, they still have access to you emotionally. That kills their motivation to reflect. That kills the discomfort of your absence. That kills the lessons your silence was teaching them. And if they reached out of guilt, boredom, or curiosity, your emotional outpouring makes it far too easy for them to walk away again, but this time, knowing you're still emotionally tied to them. That makes it even harder for you to recover the second time. And don't be fooled. Just because someone reached out doesn't mean they're ready to truly reconnect. Often, a message is just a probe, a breadcrumb to test the waters. When you over-explain, you confirm to them that the door is still wide open, that they don't have to earn their way back. You reward minimal effort with maximum emotional access. That's a dangerous precedent. It teaches them that you're always waiting, no matter how long they were gone, no matter how silent they were, no matter what they did. So what should you do instead? First, breathe. Sit with the emotions. Let the adrenaline pass. Don't act from your first emotional impulse. If you choose to reply, and that's a choice, not a requirement, do it from a calm, cantered place. Keep it brief, keep it neutral. Don't volunteer emotional context they didn't ask for. You don't need to perform your pain to prove your worth. You don't need to open your soul to be seen. What you need is to protect the progress you've made. What you need is to remember that some of the strongest statements are the ones never spoken. Let your absence speak for you. Let your boundaries do the talking. And above all, don't give them the blueprint to your emotional vulnerability. That blueprint gives them power. Power to manipulate, to breadcrumb, to ghost again with even more confidence. Your story is sacred. Your healing is not a performance for their sympathy. Hold your ground. Keep your emotions private, where they can mature into wisdom, not ammunition for someone else's control. Because once you fall into the habit of over-explaining, you train your nervous system to seek relief through others' understanding. And that means you're always waiting on their response to feel okay. But emotional independence is built on the opposite, knowing how to sit in your truth without needing it to be witnessed, validated, or applauded. That is where true strength lives. That is where you become untouchable. Number 2, asking for closure. When they reach out after a period of silence, it feels like the door you've been staring at for so long has finally cracked open. 1,000 questions rush into your mind like a flood. Why did you leave? Was I not enough? Did you ever really care? These questions have haunted you in quiet moments, whispered in the background of your healing, lingering like ghosts in the silence they left behind. And now that they've messaged you, you feel this surge of hope. Maybe now you'll get the truth. Maybe now they'll explain why they disappeared, why they changed, why everything fell apart. But this is one of the most deceptive and emotionally seductive traps of all: seeking closure. It feels like a path to healing, but it's often just a back door into staying emotionally entangled. Because here's the raw truth: the person who shattered your peace is almost never the one who will return it. You think you're asking for answers, but what you're really doing is giving them the power to define your healing. You're placing your emotional resolution in the hands of someone who already showed they couldn't hold it with care. You're essentially saying, "I can't move on until you explain yourself." And that kind of attachment is disguised dependence. It seems like logic, a healthy need for clarity, but at its core, it's emotional hesitation. It's resistance to letting go fully. Neuroscience confirms that the brain is wired to complete narratives. Incomplete stories cause cognitive dissonance, that itchy mental discomfort where you're trying to reconcile conflicting emotions. Your brain wants to put all the pieces together, make sense of the pain, file the memory away neatly. But emotional life doesn't work like that. Some stories don't end with a clean explanation. They end with silence. And sometimes the silence is the answer. You have to understand that asking someone who left you broken to explain why they did it is like asking the storm why it destroyed your house. The answer doesn't rebuild what was lost. And often the answers, if you even get them, are incomplete, dishonest, or just as confusing as the silence. In fact, people who are emotionally avoidant, narcissistic, or manipulative often use your craving for closure to manipulate you further. They sense your need to understand, and they exploit it, offering half-truths, ambiguous justifications, even fake apologies that reignite hope just long enough to pull you back in, only to leave you shattered again. That cycle of being reeled in and dropped over and over can be more damaging than the initial breakup. Closure becomes the hook they use to keep you on the emotional line. They'll say just enough to confuse you, just enough to make you question your progress, just enough to reopen the wound and keep control. And in those moments, you have to remember this fundamental truth: you don't need their explanation to move forward. Closure is not something they give. It's something you create. It's an internal process of accepting that you may never get the answers you want, but you can still choose to find peace. Closure isn't about understanding why they did what they did. It's about understanding that they did it, and that's enough to walk away. You get to decide that the ending is final, even if it came without a satisfying conclusion. When you stop waiting for them to give you permission to let go, you take back the authority over your own emotional life. You don't need them to admit they were wrong. You don't need them to say they still love you. You don't need them to acknowledge the damage they caused. What you need is to reclaim the story as your own, Stop letting the last chapter be written by someone else's silence. Write it yourself. They left. I didn't deserve that. But I lived, I grew, and now I rise. That's closure. That's power. That's emotional independence. Because the longer you chase closure through them, the longer you stay tethered to someone who already showed you how little they respected your heart. You end up reopening wounds that were just starting to scab over, confusing temporary attention for real change, mistaking a message for a miracle. But healing isn't about rehashing the past. It's about choosing yourself again and again, even when your brain wants to run back to what's familiar. And choosing yourself sometimes means sitting with the ache of unanswered questions, the sting of not knowing, and still deciding that your peace matters more than their explanation. If they cared enough to give you closure, they wouldn't have left you needing it. And that in itself is all the clarity you'll ever need. Emotional maturity means learning to live without certain answers, to build strength in the space where confusion once lived. It means saying, even if you never say sorry, I forgive myself. Even if you never explain, I choose to move forward. That kind of healing doesn't require their involvement. It requires your decision. So when that message comes in and the temptation creeps in to ask, why? Stop. Don't give them the power to define the ending. Define it yourself. Your story doesn't need their permission to close. It needs your courage to end it. Number 3. Replying immediately. When their name lights up your screen after days, weeks, or maybe even months of silence, the emotional reaction is almost automatic. A rush of adrenaline, a dopamine spike, a surge of hope. Your mind races, your heart pounds, and your fingers, almost without permission, move toward the keyboard. You feel the compulsion to answer immediately, as if time itself is a factor in keeping them interested. You may type, delete, retype, wondering how to sound casual but warm, distant but open. But the real mistake isn't in what you say. It's in how fast you say it. Because instant replies kill curiosity, they eliminate the unknown. They tell the person on the other side of that message that no matter how long they took to respond, no matter how they exited your life, you were still right there, emotionally ready, instantly accessible. And in the psychology of attraction and power dynamics, availability equals predictability. And predictability, especially after separation or emotional distance, kills tension. Without tension, there is no intrigue. And without intrigue, there is no value being built. One of the most overlooked truths in relationship psychology is that attraction is not just about affection, it's about perception. And perception is controlled by timing, pacing, and mystery. When someone sends you a message, especially after a period of absence, it is rarely an act of full commitment. More often, it's a test, it's a probe, it's a small breadcrumb tossed into your emotional space to see if you're still willing to follow the trail. By responding instantly, you not only swallow the bait, but you also confirm that they still hold emotional weight in your world. You validate their importance without them having to earn it back. You reinforce the idea that your time, attention, and emotional energy are still theirs to access at a moment's notice. That kind of dynamic isn't attractive, it's confirming, and what's confirmed is no longer chased. In contrast, when you delay your response, not out of manipulation, but out of self-respect and control, you shift the emotional balance. You introduce uncertainty. You send a subtle message that your time isn't freely given, that your attention isn't something they can just summon on command. This delay doesn't create conflict. It creates contrast. And in that contrast, they start to wonder. They begin to ask questions they haven't considered in a while. Are you still angry? Have you moved on? Are you with someone else? These questions breed emotional investment, and emotional investment is the root of value in all human connection. It's not cold or distant to make someone wait. It's powerful. Because value is always attached to what isn't easily acquired. Think about it. When something is available 24/7, it loses its perceived importance. Scarcity creates demand. In human interaction, scarcity is not about being absent, it's about being selective, and selectivity signals self-worth. It tells the other person that you have a life outside of them, that your emotional world has expanded, that your happiness is no longer tied to their presence. That realization can be jarring for someone who expected to find you in the exact place they left you. And make no mistake, the timing of your reply sends a message louder than your words. When you wait to respond, you're not just delaying a conversation. You're communicating a shift in dynamic. You're showing that they no longer have the power to disrupt your peace. That you're not jumping to reconnect. That your silence wasn't a pause. It was a reset. It's important to understand the psychological mechanism behind this. Humans are wired to pursue what is uncertain, to chase what is not immediately given. This is known as the reward uncertainty effect. The idea that when rewards are unpredictable, the emotional attachment to them grows stronger. This is the same principle used in gambling, social media, and behavioral conditioning. So, when you delay your response, you unknowingly trigger this same psychological loop. You become less predictable, more elusive, and therefore more engaging. The irony is that in relationships, especially after emotional damage, the person who appears less attached often gains more influence, and that influence isn't about manipulation. It's about emotional discipline. It's about not allowing someone back into your life just because they decided to reappear. It's about making them sit with their own curiosity, making them wonder if the door they once walked out of is still unlocked. That kind of emotional stance takes strength. It requires you to fight against your own impulses, to not seek comfort in instant connection, to not trade long-term value for short-term relief. It requires you to recognize that healing is not proven by how fast you respond, but by how well you manage your reactions. And even if you do decide to reply, let it be from a place of calm, not craving. Let it come from your rhythm, not their timing. Let it be a decision, not a reflex. Because every message you send reinforces a story, the story of whether you've grown stronger or remained the same, the story of whether you've learned to honor your own time, or if you still live according to their emotional clock. And the most powerful story you can tell, without saying a single word, is this. You no longer react. You respond. Slowly, intentionally, and only when it serves your peace, because the one who waits isn't weak. They're wise. The one who pauses before responding doesn't lose ground. They gain leverage. And in that space between the message and the reply, you reclaim your power. In the aftermath of heartache, it's easy to believe that the power lies in action, in saying something, proving something, reacting quickly to reclaim connection. But true strength is often quieter. It's in the pause, in the choice not to respond from a place of desperation, but from grounded clarity. When you've endured the storm of silence, the long nights of overthinking, and the aching process of self-reflection, you come to understand that your healing wasn't just about letting go of them. It was about holding on to yourself. Every moment you resisted the urge to chase, every time you chose not to send that message, you were writing a new story. A story not driven by fear of abandonment, but by the awareness of your worth. The reply traps we've explored aren't about the texts themselves. They're about what they reveal. They expose how easily we can revert to old patterns the moment we get a flicker of hope. But hope without self-respect becomes a trap. Stoic wisdom reminds us that our power doesn't lie in outcomes, but in our ability to govern our impulses. And when it comes to dealing with someone who once disrupted your peace, the most commanding move isn't a clever reply. It's restraint, because in restraint, you force them to sit with their own decisions. You make them face the weight of losing someone who doesn't beg, doesn't explain, doesn't react. Your pause is not silence. It's pressure. It's space that makes them question everything they thought they knew about you. And in that space, something powerful shifts. You no longer revolve around their orbit. You become your own center of gravity. So, when that message comes through and your fingers itch to reply, remember this. You've already fought to reclaim your self-worth. Don't trade it away for a conversation that may only reopen old wounds. Not all messages deserve a reply. Some only deserve your silence. Because silence, when chosen, is not empty. It's full of power, dignity, and unshakable control. Let that be your legacy, not as someone who begged to be understood, but as someone who became untouchable through composure. If this video helped you pause before replying, if it reminded you of your worth, then do one thing right now. Tap that like button to keep this message alive. Drop a comment. Which of these traps hit you the hardest? And most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more Stoic, psychology-driven content to help you regain control, find peace, and never beg for love again. Your story isn't over. You're just getting started. Stay silent. Stay strong. Until next time.